Right now, in 2025, there are people living in conditions worse than anything you've seen in history documentaries. They're being tortured, starved, and worked to death in places that officially don't exist. The North Korean government denies these camps are real, but survivors have escaped, and what they've told us will make you question everything you think you know about human rights in the modern world. Camp 22, Camp 15, Camp 16, Camp 25. These names mean nothing to most people, but to the estimated 80,000 to 120,000 prisoners trapped inside North Korea's secret prison system, they represent a nightmare that never ends. We're not talking about regular prisons where people serve time and get released. These are political prison camps where entire families disappear for generations because one person said the wrong thing or tried to leave the country. Children are born behind barbed wire and die there without ever knowing freedom. Today, I'm going to show you the real story of North Korea's hidden gulag system, and I need to warn you, some of what you're about to hear is deeply disturbing. But it's important that we talk about it because these places exist right now, and the world has largely chosen to look the other way. Here's the fundamental problem we're dealing with. North Korea operates what is essentially a network of death camps in the 21st century, and the international community has been almost powerless to stop it or even fully document it. These camps are hidden in remote mountain valleys, surrounded by multiple layers of security, completely cut off from outside observation. Satellite imagery can show us the general layout and some of the structures, but it can't tell us what's happening inside the barracks at night, or in the interrogation rooms, or in the sections where public executions take place. The only real information we have comes from a handful of people who managed to escape, and I mean a handful. Out of the tens of thousands imprisoned in these camps over the decades, maybe a few dozen have successfully gotten out and made it to safety in South Korea or other countries where they could tell their stories. Think about those odds. The vast majority of people who enter these camps never leave. They die there from starvation, disease, execution, or work accidents. And here's what makes this especially challenging for the outside world. North Korea denies that political prison camps exist at all. When confronted with satellite evidence and survivor testimony, their official position is that these are just regular correctional facilities or reform centers. They've spent years working to conceal these camps from satellite surveillance, moving buildings underground, covering structures with camouflage, and limiting any visible activity during times when spy satellites are overhead. So we're trying to expose and challenge a system that operates in complete secrecy in one of the most closed societies on Earth, run by a government that refuses to acknowledge the system even exists. How do you hold someone accountable for crimes they deny committing in places they claim aren't real? The challenge extends beyond just North Korea's denial. China, which shares a long border with North Korea, sends defectors back if they're caught trying to escape. This means that even people who manage to get out of the camps and flee North Korea entirely can still end up being returned to face execution or worse. The international legal framework for addressing these camps is weak because North Korea isn't part of most human rights treaties, and the ones they have signed, they simply ignore. We're also dealing with a propaganda problem. North Korea has spent decades conditioning its population to believe that the camps are necessary and justified. They teach children that people who end up in camps are enemies of the state who deserve punishment. They create a system where families turn on each other out of fear, reporting any suspicious behavior to avoid being sent to the camps themselves. The entire society is structured around fear of these places. Let me take you into the world of North Korea's prison camp system, starting with how we know what we know. The evidence comes from multiple sources that all paint the same horrifying picture. We have testimony from former prisoners who escaped. We have accounts from former guards who defected and felt guilty about what they participated in. We have satellite imagery analyzed by human rights organizations, and we have documents smuggled out of North Korea that detail the camp system's structure and rules. One of the most detailed accounts comes from Shin Dong-hyuk, who was born in Camp 14 in 1982. Let that sink in for a moment. Born in a prison camp. His mother was a prisoner, his father was a prisoner, and under North Korea's system of collective punishment, he was considered a prisoner from birth. He never knew anything except life inside those fences until he escaped in 2005 at the age of 23. Shin's story gives us a window into what daily life looks like in these camps. He describes growing up in a world where the concept of family barely existed. He lived in different housing from his parents and only saw them occasionally. The authorities deliberately keep families separated to prevent them from forming bonds that might lead to collective resistance. Children are taught to distrust their own parents and to report any anti-regime statements to the guards. Food in the camps is carefully rationed to keep prisoners weak and compliant. Shin described getting corn porridge with some cabbage and on rare occasions a few scraps of protein. Prisoners are expected to supplement this starvation diet by catching rats, insects, or anything else they can find. He talks about finding grains of corn in cow manure and washing them off to eat. This isn't ancient history. This is what was happening in the early 2000s, and it's still happening now. The work in these camps is brutal and dangerous. Prisoners work in coal mines without proper safety equipment. They cut down trees in mountain forests regardless of weather conditions. They work in factories producing goods that might even end up in international markets, though the supply chains are deliberately obscured. The workday starts before dawn and continues until after dark. There are no days off, no holidays, no rest periods except for a few hours of sleep each night. Shin describes a moment that really captures the psychological horror of these camps. When he was a child, he witnessed his mother and brother trying to escape. He reported them to the guards because he had been conditioned to believe that's what he was supposed to do. As punishment for their escape attempt, they were publicly executed. Shin was forced to watch his own mother being hanged. This is the level of psychological control the camp system achieves. They turn children into informants against their own families and make them witness the consequences. Now let me tell you about Camp 22, which is one of the largest and most notorious facilities in the system. Camp 22, officially known as Haengyang, is located in the northeastern part of North Korea near the Chinese border. At its peak, this camp held an estimated 50,000 prisoners across an area of about 87 square miles. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the size of a small city, except instead of homes and schools and parks, it's guard towers and barbed wire and work sites. A former guard from Camp 22 named Kwon Hyuk defected and gave detailed testimony about what happened there. He described a section of the camp that was used for human experimentation. Yes, you heard that right, human experimentation. According to Kwon, prisoners were used as test subjects for chemical and biological weapons. He described watching through a window as a family of 4, 2 parents and 2 children, were brought into a sealed glass chamber. Gas was pumped in, and he watched them die over the course of several minutes. The parents tried to protect their children, using their own bodies to shield them, but of course, it made no difference. Kwon said these experiments happened regularly, using different chemicals to test their effectiveness. The scientists running these experiments treated it like routine work, taking notes and discussing results as people suffocated or convulsed in front of them. The prisoners used in these experiments were typically those who were considered troublemakers or who were too weak to work effectively. From the camp administration's perspective, they were going to die anyway, so they might as well serve a purpose. This testimony is backed up by other defectors who worked in North Korea's chemical weapons program. They've described a research focus on developing agents that could be used in warfare or assassination, and the need for human testing to understand effects and dosages. The camps provide an unlimited supply of test subjects who can be used without any ethical oversight whatsoever. Camp 22 was partially closed down in the late 2000s, probably because satellite imagery had revealed too much about its layout and activities. But the prisoners weren't released. They were transferred to other camps. When North Korea closes or relocates a camp, it's not out of humanitarian concern. It's purely about maintaining secrecy. They move things around to make it harder for outside observers to track what's happening. Let's talk about Camp 15, which is still operational today. This camp is located near Yadok in central North Korea and has been documented extensively through satellite imagery. You can actually see the camp on Google Earth if you know where to look, though of course the imagery doesn't show you what's happening on the ground. Camp 15 is divided into two zones, the Revolutionary Zone and the Total Control Zone. The Revolutionary Zone is for prisoners who might eventually be released if they successfully reform their thinking. These are typically people who committed minor political offenses or who are related to someone who did. They undergo intense ideological re-education alongside forced labor. Every day includes hours of study sessions where they memorize the works of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, and now Kim Jong-un. They have to write self-criticism papers detailing their crimes against the state and their progress toward becoming proper revolutionary citizens. But here's the thing. Even in the revolutionary zone, the conditions are absolutely brutal. Former prisoners describe the same starvation rations, the same dangerous work, the same random beatings from guards. The only difference is that they're told they might someday get out, which gives them a tiny shred of hope to cling to. That hope keeps them compliant. Most people in the revolutionary zone never actually get released, though. The standards for successful re-education are vague and constantly shifting. People can spend decades in the revolutionary zone waiting for a release that never comes. The total control zone is for prisoners who will never be released. These are people accused of serious political crimes, like trying to defect, criticizing the leadership, or possessing South Korean media. It's also where entire families are sent under the policy of guilt by association. If you commit a political crime in North Korea, your parents, your siblings, your children, even your grandparents can be arrested and sent to the camps. The ideology behind this is that disloyalty runs in families, so the whole family line needs to be eliminated. In the total control zone, there's no pretense of reform or eventual release. You're there until you die, and everyone knows it. This creates a different psychological environment. Some prisoners give up entirely and die within months. Others develop a kind of numb acceptance and just go through the motions of survival day by day. A very few maintain some spark of humanity and resistance, but the camp system is designed to crush that out of people as quickly as possible. Kang Chol-hwan is another former prisoner who has written extensively about his experiences. He was sent to Camp 15 when he was 9 years old along with his entire family. His grandfather had been accused of treason, and under the guilt by association policy, 3 generations of the family were imprisoned. Kang spent 10 years in the camp before being released in 1987. He eventually escaped North Korea and wrote a book called The Aquariums of Pyongyang, detailing his experiences. Kang describes the casual cruelty that permeated every aspect of camp life. Guards would beat prisoners for minor infractions or for no reason at all, just to maintain an atmosphere of fear. Public executions were regular events that all prisoners were forced to attend. The executions served multiple purposes. They eliminated prisoners who were deemed problematic, they served as warnings to others, and they forced the prisoner population to participate in the regime's violence, making everyone complicit. He talks about watching a man being executed for stealing food. The man was so emaciated that he could barely stand as they led him to the execution ground. He had stolen a few potatoes from a storage building because he was starving. For this, he was shot in front of the entire camp population. His body was left on display for days as a reminder. This is the level of punishment for trying to stay alive. Another aspect of camp life that Kang describes is the complete absence of privacy or personal space. Prisoners live in overcrowded barracks where disease spreads rapidly. There's no heat in winter, even though North Korean winters are brutally cold. Prisoners sleep packed together for warmth, but many still freeze to death during the coldest months. There's no medical care beyond the most basic first aid. If you get seriously sick or injured, you either recover on your own or you die. The sanitation in the camps is non-existent. There are open-pit latrines that overflow and contaminate the water supply. Prisoners develop chronic diarrhea and other intestinal diseases that further weaken their already malnourished bodies. Skin diseases are universal. Lice and other parasites are everywhere. The overall health condition of camp prisoners is so poor that guards can often identify escaped prisoners who are caught because they look drastically worse than normal North Korean citizens. Now let's talk about Camp 16, which is the largest political prison camp still in operation. Camp 16, also known as Hwasong, covers about 210 square miles in central North Korea. That's massive. To give you a sense of scale, that's bigger than the entire city of Philadelphia. Current estimates put the prisoner population somewhere between 15,000 and 50,000 people, though exact numbers are impossible to verify. What makes Camp 16 particularly significant is that it appears to be entirely a total control zone with no revolutionary zone. Everyone sent there is expected to die there. The camp includes multiple work sites spread across the mountain valleys. There are coal mines, logging operations, farms, and factories. Prisoners are distributed to different work sites based on their physical condition and the camp administration's needs. Former guard Lee Young-guk defected in the late 1990s and provided detailed information about Camp 16. He described a rigid hierarchy among the guards and camp administrators. At the top are political officers from the State Security Department who oversee the ideological aspects of the camp. Below them are military security officers who handle the actual day-to-day operation. At the bottom are regular guards, many of whom are conscripts doing mandatory military service who happen to be assigned to camp duty. Lee said that guards are trained to view prisoners as subhuman enemies of the state. During their training, they're repeatedly told that these prisoners are criminals who betrayed the revolution and don't deserve sympathy. Guards who show any kindness to prisoners are themselves at risk of being accused of ideological weakness and potentially ending up as prisoners. This creates a system where cruelty becomes the default behavior because it's the safest way for guards to protect themselves. The guard towers around Camp 16 are spaced to provide overlapping fields of fire across the perimeter fences. The fences themselves are multiple layers of barbed wire, some of it electrified. There are minefields in certain sections. Escape is theoretically possible, but extremely dangerous and unlikely to succeed. Lee estimated that during his time as a guard, he witnessed or heard about maybe a dozen escape attempts. Only one succeeded to his knowledge, and that person was probably caught later because defectors are usually apprehended within a few days without help. Inside Camp 16, there are different prisoner classifications that determine what kind of work you're assigned to and how you're treated. The lowest classification is for prisoners deemed the worst offenders. They work in the coal mines, which is essentially a death sentence. The mines are dangerous with frequent cave-ins and accidents. There's no safety equipment. Ventilation is poor, so miners breathe coal dust constantly. Most prisoners assigned to mine work die within a few years from accidents, respiratory disease, or exhaustion. The next classification up works in forestry, cutting down trees and processing lumber. This is also dangerous work with primitive tools and no safety measures, but it's slightly better than the mines because you're above ground. The highest classification is for prisoners who work the farms or in light manufacturing. This is considered the best assignment because the work is less dangerous and there might be opportunities to steal food. But even the best assignments in Camp 16 are still a nightmare. The food rations are starvation level, the working conditions are brutal, the guards are violent, and there's no hope of ever leaving. Some prisoners lose their minds from the psychological stress. Lee described seeing prisoners who stopped speaking, stopped responding to commands, just shut down mentally while their bodies continued to go through the motions of work until they collapsed. One of the most disturbing aspects of the camp system is what happens to women and girls. Multiple defectors have testified about systematic rape and sexual abuse by guards. Women prisoners have no protection and no recourse. If a guard decides to abuse a woman, he can do it without any consequences. If the woman gets pregnant from rape, there are reports of forced abortions or babies being killed after birth, particularly if the father is suspected to be Chinese or from another country, because North Korea is obsessed with racial purity. Female prisoners are also subjected to horrific punishments. There are accounts of women being hung by their wrists for days as punishment, to the point where their shoulders are permanently damaged. Women are forced to work throughout pregnancy, often leading to miscarriages. New mothers are given minimal recovery time before being sent back to work. The combination of malnutrition, overwork, and lack of medical care means that maternal and infant mortality rates in the camps are astronomical. Children born in the camps face a particularly cruel fate. They grow up knowing nothing but imprisonment and suffering. They receive minimal education, just enough to make them functional workers. They're taught from the earliest age that their families are criminals and that they're paying for the sins of their relatives. Many don't survive childhood due to disease and malnutrition. Those who do survive grow up physically and mentally stunted by the conditions they've endured. There's a concept in the camps called collective punishment. If one prisoner violates a rule, everyone in their work unit or housing unit can be punished. This creates an environment where prisoners police each other out of self-preservation. Nobody wants to be associated with someone who might break the rules because they'll be punished too. This breaks down solidarity among prisoners and makes organized resistance almost impossible. The rules in the camps are extensive and arbitrary. You can be punished for not bowing deeply enough to a portrait of Kim Il-sung, for sitting in the wrong place, for speaking without permission, for showing insufficient enthusiasm during ideological study sessions, for having a negative facial expression. The guards have essentially unlimited authority to determine what constitutes a violation and what the punishment should be. Punishments range from reduced food rations to physical beatings to torture to execution. There's a punishment called the pigeon torture, where your hands are tied behind your back and then pulled up toward your shoulders, forcing your chest forward and putting enormous strain on your shoulder joints. Prisoners are left in this position for hours or days, causing permanent damage. There's another punishment where you're forced to kneel on a hard surface with a wooden board across your legs, and then guards stand or jump on the board, crushing your legs. The psychological torture is just as bad as the physical. Prisoners are forced to inform on each other, creating an atmosphere of total distrust. They're subjected to constant ideological haranguing about their crimes and unworthiness. They're denied any information about the outside world. Many prisoners don't even know that other countries exist or that life could be different. The camps are their entire reality. Let me tell you about Park Young-chol, a former security agent who defected after becoming disillusioned with the system. Park had access to documentation about the camp system because of his position in the state security department. He described seeing reports that detailed the prisoner population numbers, deaths, and production outputs from each camp. The camps are treated as economic assets by the North Korean government. The goods produced by prison labor, coal, minerals, timber, manufactured items generate revenue for the regime. Park said that the camp administration has production quotas they need to meet. If production falls below quota, the prisoners are punished with reduced rations or increased work hours. This creates a vicious cycle where already malnourished prisoners are forced to work harder with less food, leading to more deaths, which reduces the labor force, which makes it harder to meet quotas. The camp administrators are caught between the impossible demands from Pyongyang and the physical limitations of their prisoner workforce. He also described the practice of using prisoners for weapons testing. North Korea develops its military technology with limited resources and needs ways to test effectiveness. Apparently, some camps have areas designated for testing weapons on prisoners. This serves both a practical purpose for weapons development and a punishment purpose for prisoners deemed expendable. Park found this practice personally disturbing, which was part of what led him to eventually defect. The location of these camps is strategic. They're placed in remote mountain regions that are difficult to access and easy to secure. The surrounding areas are designated as restricted zones where normal citizens can't travel with special permits. This geographical isolation serves multiple purposes. It keeps the camps hidden from casual observation. It makes escape more difficult, because escapees have to traverse miles of wilderness before reaching any area with normal population. And it prevents information about the camps from spreading to the general North Korean population. Satellite imagery has been crucial in documenting these camps because it's one of the few ways to observe them without having someone on the ground. Organizations like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International have worked with satellite imaging companies to track the camps over time. The images show the expansion of certain camps, the closure and relocation of others, and some details about the internal structure. You can see the guard posts, the administrative buildings, the prisoner housing, and the work areas. You can see the fences and the roads leading in and out. What you can't see is the human suffering happening inside those buildings. The imagery gives us the where and the roughly what, but survivor testimony is what tells us the how and the why. Together, these sources of information paint a comprehensive picture of the camp system. One thing that comes through in almost every survivor account is the randomness of violence. Guards will beat prisoners for no apparent reason, just out of boredom or frustration, or because they can. This unpredictability is psychologically devastating, because prisoners can't protect themselves by following rules. You can do everything right and still be beaten or punished. This learned helplessness is part of how the system breaks people down. There are also accounts of guards forcing prisoners to fight each other for entertainment. Prisoners who refuse are beaten. Prisoners who fight too half-heartedly are beaten. The guards gamble on the outcomes. It's a form of dehumanization that serves to remind prisoners that they have no dignity, no autonomy, no value beyond what entertainment or labor they can provide. The food situation deserves more explanation because it's so central to the camp experience. The official rations are calculated to keep prisoners alive but weak. A typical daily ration might be about 600 grams of corn, which is roughly 1,800 calories if you're lucky enough to get the full amount. But prisoners are doing hard physical labor that burns 3,000 to 4,000 calories per day. The math doesn't work. Your body starts consuming itself. Muscle wasting, organ damage, cognitive decline, all the effects of long-term starvation. Prisoners supplement these rations by any means possible, catching rats and snakes, finding edible plants and roots, stealing from the crops they're forced to grow, though this is extremely risky, because getting caught stealing food can result in execution. Some prisoners eat dirt or clay to fill their stomachs, which provides no nutrition and can cause intestinal blockages, but temporarily eases the feeling of hunger. The psychological effect of constant hunger is profound. It becomes all you can think about. Your entire existence narrows down to the search for food. You lose the ability to think about the future, or plan, or hope, because all your mental energy is consumed by the immediate need to eat. This is another way the camp system controls prisoners. Keep them so focused on survival that they can't organize or resist. Former prisoners talk about food obsession continuing even after they escape and have adequate nutrition. They hoard food. They panic if they don't know where their next meal is coming from. They wake up in the night thinking about food. The psychological scars from that level of deprivation last forever. Let's talk about the medical situation in the camps, or rather, the complete lack of it. There are no doctors. There might be a prisoner with some basic medical knowledge who serves as a medic, but they have no supplies, no equipment, no medications. If you get sick, you either get better on your own or you die. If you're injured at work, you might get a bandage if you're lucky. Serious injuries often result in death from infection or blood loss. Dental care doesn't exist. Prisoners' teeth rot and fall out from malnutrition and lack of hygiene. This makes eating the already inadequate food even more difficult. Eyesight deteriorates from vitamin deficiencies, particularly vitamin A. Prisoners go blind and are still forced to work until they become completely unable to function, at which point they're left to die. Diseases spread rapidly in the crowded, unsanitary conditions. Tuberculosis is endemic in the camps. Prisoners develop chronic coughs that never go away. They cough up blood. They slowly suffocate as their lungs deteriorate, and they keep working until they can't anymore. There's no treatment, no isolation of sick prisoners to prevent spread. Everyone is exposed to everything. Parasitic infections are universal. Intestinal worms, liver flukes, other parasites that come from contaminated water and food. These parasites consume what little nutrition the prisoners are taking in, making the malnutrition even worse. Prisoners' stomachs become distended from the parasite load. It's a miserable existence, compounded by layers of preventable health problems. The winter conditions in these camps are particularly deadly. North Korean winters are harsh, with temperatures dropping well below zero. The prisoner housing has no insulation, no heating. Prisoners are given thin clothing that provides minimal protection. At night, they huddle together for warmth, but many still freeze to death. Frostbite is common, leading to lost fingers and toes and permanent damage. Summer brings different challenges. The heat and humidity in the unventilated housing becomes oppressive. The inadequate sanitation becomes even worse. Disease spreads faster. Prisoners working in the fields or forests suffer from heat exhaustion and dehydration. There's no good season in the camps. Each brings its own forms of suffering. Now I want to talk about the psychological coping mechanisms that prisoners develop, because the fact that anyone survives these conditions at all is remarkable. Some prisoners retreat into fantasy, spending their mental energy imagining different lives or remembering better times before imprisonment. This can provide temporary escape, but also makes the reality harder to bear when they snap back to it. Others focus on small goals, surviving until tomorrow, getting through this work shift, finding something to eat today, breaking existence down into manageable pieces rather than thinking about years or decades of imprisonment. This incremental approach to survival helps some people maintain sanity. Religious or spiritual belief, where it exists, can provide comfort. But this has to be kept completely hidden because any expression of religion is prohibited and punished. Prisoners who are discovered praying or possessing any religious material face severe punishment or execution. Still, some people maintain internal faith as a way to find meaning in suffering. Relationships between prisoners, though discouraged and dangerous, sometimes form. People find ways to show small kindnesses to each other despite the risk. Sharing a bit of food, warning someone about a dangerous guard. These moments of human connection are rare but powerful. They remind prisoners that they're still human, despite the system's efforts to dehumanize them. The camp system also has an effect on North Korean society as a whole, beyond just the people imprisoned. The existence of the camps creates an atmosphere of terror that keeps the entire population compliant. Everyone knows that political camps exist, even though they're not openly discussed. The knowledge that you and your entire family could disappear for minor infractions keeps people afraid to speak out, afraid to question, afraid to do anything that might be interpreted as disloyalty. This fear extends to everyday interactions. People are careful about what they say, even to family members, because children are taught to report their parents if they hear anything suspicious. Neighbors inform on neighbors. Co-workers inform on co-workers. The regime has successfully turned the entire society into a surveillance network where everyone watches everyone else. The camps also serve as a destination for people who violate North Korea's social control system in ways that don't necessarily seem political to outsiders. Watching South Korean television dramas is a political crime that can send you to the camps. Trying to leave the country is treason. Speaking positively about South Korea or criticizing conditions in North Korea is sedition. The definition of political crime is so broad that almost any deviation from perfect loyalty can be punished with imprisonment. There's also a category of prisoners who are there because of their songbun, which is North Korea's caste system based on your family's historical political loyalty. If your grandparents were landowners before the Korean War, or if they fled south during the war, or if they had any connection to Christianity or other religions, your family has bad songbun. People with bad songbun are already disadvantaged in North Korean society, and they're also more likely to be sent to camps if any suspicion arises about their loyalty. So here we are in 2025, and this entire system still exists. Right now, as you're watching this, there are people trapped in these camps experiencing the same suffering that prisoners experienced 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 60 years ago. The methods haven't changed much. The conditions haven't improved. The camps continue to function as tools of terror and control for the regime. What makes this the crucial moment in our story is the realization that we know about these camps. We have evidence, we have testimony, we have satellite imagery. International organizations have documented the camps extensively. The United Nations Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights in North Korea published a detailed report in 2014 that concluded crimes against humanity are being committed in these camps. They recommended referring North Korea to the International Criminal Court. And yet nothing has happened. The camps continue operating. Prisoners continue suffering and dying. The international community has written reports and passed resolutions and expressed concern, but concrete action to actually shut down these camps or hold the North Korean leadership accountable has not materialized. China continues to send defectors back. Russia provides diplomatic cover for North Korea. The mechanisms that exist to address human rights atrocities have failed to touch this situation. This is the critical point. We can't say we didn't know. We know. The information is available. The evidence is overwhelming. The question isn't whether these camps exist or whether crimes are being committed there. The question is whether the world cares enough to do something about it. And so far, the answer appears to be no. Let me bring this all together. North Korea operates a system of political prison camps that holds somewhere between 80,000 and 120,000 people in conditions that amount to systematic torture and killing. These camps have existed since the 1950s and continue operating today. They're hidden in remote mountain regions, surrounded by security measures designed to prevent escape and outside observation. The camps serve multiple purposes for the regime. They eliminate political opposition by imprisoning anyone who shows disloyalty or independent thinking. They create terror throughout North Korean society by demonstrating the consequences of stepping out of line. They generate economic value through forced labor that produces goods and materials. And they allow the regime to experiment with weapons and other technologies using human subjects. The conditions in these camps are designed to break people physically and psychologically. Starvation-level food rations, brutal forced labor, no medical care, systematic violence from guards, public executions, family separation, constant ideological indoctrination. The combination of these factors creates an environment where death is common and survival is an achievement. We know about these camps primarily through testimony from the tiny number of people who have escaped. Shin Dong-hyuk, Kang Chol-hwan, and others have courageously shared their experiences despite the trauma of reliving these memories. Former guards and security agents who defected have provided details about how the system operates from the inside. Satellite imagery has confirmed the physical existence of the camps and tracked changes over time. The specific camps we discussed today, Camp 22, Camp 15, Camp 16, and others, represent just part of a larger gulag system. There are smaller detention facilities, interrogation centers, and transit camps throughout North Korea. The total number of people caught up in this system at any given time is impossible to know precisely, but it's certainly in the hundreds of thousands when you include all the different types of facilities. The international response has been inadequate. The UN has documented the situation and called for action, but the political will to actually do something doesn't exist. North Korea is protected by China and Russia in the Security Council, making meaningful sanctions or interventions difficult. South Korea wants to maintain the possibility of reconciliation with the North, so they're careful about pushing too hard on human rights issues. Individual countries have imposed sanctions on North Korea for various reasons, including human rights abuses. But these sanctions haven't changed the regime's behavior. The camps continue operating regardless of international pressure. North Korea has shown that it's willing to endure economic hardship and isolation rather than make concessions on what it views as internal matters. For the prisoners still trapped in these camps, there is no realistic hope of rescue or release. Their survival depends on enduring conditions that kill many people around them. Those who do survive long enough might see the regime change or collapse someday, but that could be decades away if it happens at all. For many current prisoners, the camps will be where they spend the rest of their lives. The truth about North Korea's hidden prisons is that they represent one of the worst ongoing human rights catastrophes in the modern world. The scale of suffering, the systematic nature of the abuse, and the complete lack of accountability create a situation that demands our attention and action. These camps exist because the international community has allowed them to exist. We've prioritized other concerns over the lives of people trapped in these places. Every person in those camps is someone with hopes, fears, memories, and relationships. They're not abstract statistics. They're human beings experiencing unimaginable suffering because of the circumstances of their birth, or the actions of their relatives, or minor infractions that any of us might commit. The randomness of who ends up in the camps is part of what makes this so terrifying. In North Korea, you don't have to do anything particularly wrong to be imprisoned. You just have to be unlucky. The survivors who have escaped carry the memories of what they experienced and the guilt of leaving others behind. They deal with physical health problems from years of malnutrition and untreated medical conditions. They struggle with psychological trauma that manifests as nightmares, anxiety, depression, and difficulty trusting others. And they face the knowledge that speaking out about their experiences might endanger family members still in North Korea. But they speak out anyway, because they want the world to know. They want their suffering and the suffering of those still imprisoned to mean something. They want accountability and justice and change. They want these camps to be shut down and the prisoners released and the perpetrators punished. Whether any of that will happen remains to be seen, but their testimony ensures that we can't claim ignorance.